Hi, I'm Cindy Cash, Principal of Ray White North Richmond, and I'm here again with Troy Myers from Urban City Group. Welcome back to our series of podcasts. Welcome, Troy.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, so today we're going to focus on unapproved structures, which is a biggie for the Hawkesbury. We mentioned in our previous podcast that there's a bit of a myth around, just build it now, worry about it later. And also, after 7 years, it doesn't matter anymore. That's a couple of things that people actually on a regular basis comment to me. So, it becomes a real issue again. And as we said before, there's a lot of things that we need to deal with in life, and we don't need to have more stress when we're looking to sell our home. So, what do you have to say about that?
Don't build unauthorised structures for a start. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, it does happen quite a bit.
I think they think it's cheaper and easier, and they're trying to avoid the long-winded process of actually going through the approval, which, for a lot of people it does become very long-winded.
And I totally understand it. These days, more than ever before, the level of information and the time and the money that is required to get an approval is, it's a lot. We're in affordability, housing affordability crisis, and I think now regulation probably amounts to 50% of the building of a house. So I can understand why people go and do these things and thinking that if they just shortcut it and I'll go and build it, then I won't have to worry about that and I'll save myself a lot of money. And nothing could be further from the truth. So I think at Urban City Group, I would estimate that, between 15 and 20% of our business is getting people out of trouble for building structures that haven't got approval and haven't been inspected. And the money that you thought that you would save, I reckon you've probably, if you've gone and done it, you're actually going to probably cause yourself a 400% or 500% increase in the cost of getting that approval, and you'll lose a lot of time and possibly sales. You often get people come in and say, I've got to settle next week, and the agents just asked me to come in and try and get this sorted out with you, and I'm going, well, you better tell them to wait 6 months, because in order to be able to even get your application ready to be able to put into council for a retrospective approval is going to take 8 weeks to 12 weeks to get together, depending on what's involved, and then you're probably going to be 3 to 6 months before you're going to get your DA out. So there goes your 42-day settlement out the door. So
does it make any difference if they've used a professional tradesperson? Because that's another thing I get. We used a qualified builder, we used a person who did it really well, as opposed to somebody who's just knocked it up themselves with no skill. Well,
the answer is, I guess it helps somewhat in terms of the information that we're going to need to get together. It doesn't help. I'm sure the structure's been built well, and that's usually the common argument that we get. It's been built great, and I'm going, looks wonderful. But the problem is that in our society, or particularly the approval process, it's really process driven. So it's not so much it is to a certain extent that it's built well, but if you don't have the compliance and the approval, that's where the value is, and that's where the issue is. So, and these days too, for tradesmen, it's a bit risky. So we've got the new building commission now. If they were to go and take on and do this work, licensed tradesmen, and not get the approvals, then they can get themselves in a bit of hot water as well with their insurers and their regulators and so forth, so on.
Yeah. There's another thing too, like people think that they don't need to get council approval if it's not over a certain amount of money or over a certain size. Like they say, well, it only cost me $10,000, so I don't need to worry about it. There's no dollar value to it?
There's no dollar value, but there is the opportunity in what we call the state environmental planning policy for exempt development. So there are certain types of development that you can do without approval, and there's criteria for those, so it can be done, but you've got to know where to find that, and it can be tricky or complicated, but it can be done, but a lot of people don't know about it. We do help people with that as well. So, there's there's pretty much not much that you can do without approval these days.
What about internal changes, like to change from a non-habitable area to a habitable area? So, for example, I could rattle off so many different...
Garage, the garage that gets turned into a bedroom.
Yeah, I've made it into a couple of bedrooms, or it was a laundry and they've turned it into a bedroom because this was something I learned. I didn't realise that a wet area is not considered to be a habitable area, same as a garage.
No, that's right. Yeah, so it is a misconception. I actually had an inquiry yesterday about that. If you're changing the configuration of the internal configuration of a building, then automatically you need an approval. So, if you're turning a garage to a bedroom, or even if you're, moving, just changing the walls in the inside from in between a couple of bedrooms, you've got to have approval. So just because it's inside the building doesn't mean you don't need an approval. You definitely do, and you should always probably we have an inquiry service, so you can either call someone like myself or the council, and they should be able to give you that information. But yeah, you do need an approval.
I think this is really important information because a lot of people just don't know that. They think they can just move things around and they don't need to get approval, but it can affect the valuation of a property when you go to sell. Like a buyer obviously has to get a bank valuation if you've turned a 3-bedroom house into a 5-bedroom house because you've utilised the garage space. How does that work? It becomes a problem, and an insurance issue as well. So
totally. So yeah, we see it a lot, and I can understand how people would use that option because it's a cheap option to do. Put a door out the front where the roller door used to be, and then give it a lick of paint, and we've got ourselves a new bedroom. Why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. I mean, look, and it can be done. It's not that it can't be done, but obviously there's rules and regulations around it. You need to get it approved. You can't just do it.
Yes, that's right. Because like you said, you're turning a non-habitable space into a habitable space, and there's a few things you need to look at in building those things. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I was going to talk about, which is a big one, is for the Hawkesbury, is the Hawkesbury Shouse. Like people love to put up a shed, and then it turns into a shouse because they build a little house inside, and hopefully live there merrily for as long as it takes to save up to actually build a house. But they can't just live there without approval. So is it possible to get a shouse approved to live in?
Yes, I love shouses. I think they're great because it's like having your man cave right near your front door. So, look, there is. There's nothing to say what a house has to be or look like. So, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So, you can, if you just say, for instance, you bought your dream block of land, and funds are tight, and you want to be able to get there and have somewhere to live with your family. And the house is the shed building is an option, and we can do it. We can approve them. They can be approved via compliant development, or they can be approved, via DA with the council. And we've done plenty of them. And then later on, when you want to build a dream home, then you can either apply for a separate use for the house to be something else, or just recently we've been able to get detached dual locks over the line with Hawkesbury Council, which I think is a great thing. So, then you could have, the approval would be for a detached dual occupancy. So there is the ability to do it. Like I said, just call the council or call someone like myself because it can be done. You don't have to go, doing all those works, taking all that risk and putting yourself through all that. There's a legal way to do it.
There's a process, yeah. So touching back onto what you just said about the council approval for the detached dual occupancy, that's probably going to be another future podcast. But that was just approved on the council meeting last week, wasn't it? The 10th of June. You want to tell us a bit about what happened there?
Yeah, so it was fantastic. It's been 20 years in the making for us. The council resolved to put a planning proposal together to, I think it's essentially take out a word in the land use table. So it's simple, and it sounds simple, but I think there's some processes to go through. So hopefully, in the near future, that the Department of Planning will approve that, and then we'll be able to start seeing detached dual occupancy in the Hawkesbury.
Yeah, that'll be very much needed. I mean, it'll help a lot with multi-generational living and, people being able to have their children or their elderly parents living with them. And that's why that comes under the unapproved works because, we find a lot of people have just knocked up a like an unapproved structure on their acreage for the needs, and they just, out of desperation, they just had to do it. And then, so what I want to know is, will they be able to get retrospective approval? Like if they have built something like that, will the detached dual occupancy rules cover for somebody who may have already done that?
Well, I think it would, in the same way that we do any retrospective approval now.
Be the same.
Yeah, we would just have to go through that process of confirming that it's been built correctly, it complies with the council's development controls. But the simple answer is yes. Excuse me, and I agree with you totally. This policy has come from a real need, and there have been a lot of people just desperate because they need to look after a sick parent, or their kids haven't got anywhere else to go with their young family. So I think it's a good thing. It's a definite need.
Well, it's a fantastic, I'd call it a milestone, really. I mean, it's one of the most talked about topics in the Hawkesbury, in the acreage market, as to why can't we have that in the Hawkesbury, yet everybody else allows it. So
that's right.
Fantastic work with that. And I know that you did you put forward a speech, at the meeting, and that was obviously very well received by the...
It was, and I'd just like to acknowledge also Councillor Zambrogno. We work closely with Nathan, and he took up the cause, and I'm really glad that he did. I think that, hopefully we come up with a result that's good for everyone, and we'll be able to be talking about the Hawkesbury as, look at Hawkesbury, they do detach, and it's really good for families. So I'm looking forward to that day. Like, it's been a long, long time. And hopefully, like I said, we can get those second houses on there, and then people can look after their families and do what they need to do.
And I think from a real estate perspective, it's obviously going to help improve the value too, because if people can build 2 houses on there, then obviously that's going to increase the value of their properties, and great for the Hawkesbury as well.
I think so. And the other benefit is that we haven't had to subdivide our rural lands. We get to enjoy that rural atmosphere, which is why we all love being here. So there's no pressure on subdivision because dual occupancies aren't related to subdivision. Sounds like we're already going into the other podcast. But we can go to that. Yeah. So yeah, look, it's got so many benefits. I don't really see too many negatives with it. Probably none really. But yeah, like I said, it's something that we've been wanting to do, and hopefully, in the next little while, we'll be able to, provide more housing stock and supply. Because I think that's the big issue for us around here is supply, and that's why prices are so high. Well, not when I say high, that's why, you want to live here, but you don't want to move out. So there's only so many houses to go around.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Troy. I really appreciate having you here again today. And
thank you.
If you're watching, you can look forward to our next podcast. So thanks for watching.